This conference will now be recorded.
Thank you. We are looking at the ways in which God promised his people, or perhaps other people, and had those promises fulfilled. Not all of his promises have been fulfilled, but to things concerning Babylon, you might argue that all of those things have been fulfilled. So we're looking at Babylon in the sense of not just looking at Babylon, but we're looking at it in the sense of promises that God has fulfilled, evidence that God will always fulfill his promises. All right, so let's get into some slides and some quick facts about Babylon. Some first verse there that we have there is Genesis 10, and is the first time that Babylon is mentioned. Does anyone know what it is usually translated to in this particular chapter and verse? Yes, Babel, correct. So Babel is essentially the same word as Babylon. So it was founded all the way back in Genesis 10 by King Nimrod. So when we're talking about Babel back then, we are actually talking about the ancient city of Babylon. Babylon obviously is more of a greater area by the time we are looking at it as an empire, but that is the first sort of reference to Babylon. It's mentioned a lot of times in the Bible, 280 times, and it has gone by a number of names, as you can see there. Chaldeans is a big one. The land of Shinar, the desert of the sea, the Lady of Kingdoms, land of Merathaim, and Sheshach. So lots of different ways it is referenced based on the language that the prophet was using, based on some allusion that the prophet was trying to convey. So yeah, it's always good to know those names because it can help us to understand all of the different details there are to know about Babylon. Jackie's writing it down, a few people are writing it down, so I'm just gonna pad for time. Who else has any other fun facts about Babylon? A fun one. I don't want any boring ones.
I think the Hebrew name means let us rebel.
Let us rebel, yeah. Or Babel obviously means, is it confused or something? Confusion.
In English it is.
And you're correct. Babel. Yep. Yeah, exactly. Babel, confusion. Yep. So yeah, and it's I think Babylon is I've read somewhere that Babylon is the Greek word for Babel. I don't know if that's true. Just because you read something doesn't mean it's true, right? Fancy gardens. That's the fun sort of facts I'm after. Let's go with where it was first. Again, just making sure everyone's on the same page. It is over. This is a modern day map. This is Google Maps as of this week. And that little red dot there, obviously on the right of your screen, is where ancient Babylon was. So when we're talking about an exile of people from Judah, and that's the main sort of thing we're going to look at tonight, is they are coming from that section there down by the Red Sea and slightly south of the Dead Sea all the way over to Babylon. The beauty of Babylon, thank you, Steve. The hanging gardens, one of the ancient wonders of the world, not referenced really in the Bible. Comments? No? Do you know anything about the gardens? Wow, really? Right. Do you have any fun facts about those? Is that Marduk, or is anyone in particular? They've got 5 legs. So for people at home, they're talking about the guy there walking between 2 idols, I assume we would call them.
Yeah,
right.
The other interesting thing is that you can't see it on the picture, but they're covered in cuneiform.
They're covered in cuneiform. Fun.
All like they're covered in cuneiform.
Right. Amazing. Huh. Very good. Yeah. Amazing. Whereabouts is that picture then? British Museum. Okay. They haven't given it back to anyone, I assume. They're holding on to that. They're still looking at it. Yeah. Fair enough. No, they don't like giving things back, even if it's not theirs. And the middle picture obviously is just an artist's impression. I couldn't actually find a good picture of the fact that horses, was it 2 abreast? I can't remember what the actual line is, but could run across the top of the city walls to give you some sort of scope as to how big the fortification was of Babylon. All right. So, actually, I'm just going to move this thing so I can see what my next slide is. That's better. Okay, so what we are looking at tonight is the whole waiting for situation that Babylon presented for the people of Judah. We're not so much looking at Israel as much as we're looking at the more sort of that final sort of destruction of Jerusalem and the people being carried out of Judah. So there's actually three things people were waiting for. So there's a little bit to cover, I guess, as a result. The first one is they're waiting for a captivity. And I'll show you what I mean by that. But they knew that a captivity was evident, right? And that's an interesting thing to wait for. I think I watched Justin's talk last week from home, and he was talking about, so what's something, explain what waiting means. And everyone was like, oh, anticipation, all these things. And I'm like, it's the opposite of positive, right? This is like you're waiting for, captivity does not sound fun. Invasions, punishment, etc. The second thing we'll look at briefly is the end of the Babylonian Empire. So once they've gone into captivity, then they've got a new type of waiting, and that is that the Babylonian Empire would end. And in turn with that, because that was an event in itself to wait for, but in turn with that, returning to the land was also something they really wanted and were waiting for, right? So there's three things we kind of need to cover. Are all three relevant to us in terms of a practical application in our lives? We will have some discussion on that and figure that one out. So this is a fun diagram. If you don't have one of these in your Bible, then you need to get that back in there. I actually don't have one of these printed out at the moment. But this is always useful to help us kind of scope where we are in the picture of the Old Testament in particular through Kings and Judges. We are zooming into our area for tonight. Here we have, where's my pointer? Oh, I'm not using it. That's fine. So we have the temple destroyed as a big moment in the captivity, but it was not the beginning of the captivity. This is not the beginning of God's promise that they would go into captivity. It actually starts all the way back over here during the last few kings' reign. So the first captives get taken essentially while Judah is still very much in existence, while there's a decent population in Judah. And it begins and it goes in stages from there. The other interesting thing to always note is what prophets are we going to be looking at tonight. Ezekiel's a big part of it. Obadiah is in there. Jeremiah is a big part of it. He obviously prophesied all the way leading up to and part way through. Daniel is obviously someone that we know there's a lot of stories about his life in the Babylonian Empire. So the Christmas Carol and oh yeah, I think that's Daniel, and I think that's him maybe missing a section of between the Babylonian and the Medes and Persians, I assume. When he wasn't in power, when he wasn't writing. Yeah, I mean, I assume so because it's, yeah. Oh, it does carry the whole way down. Oh, okay. Can I? It's just a page holder so that you can, because that's it here. Ah, we could have made up some really good stories about that. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. All right. All right. Okay, so let's cover, and we're going to be reading around the room, I think. So for those at home, please be ready with your Bibles because you may not hear that well, some of the people reading. But we're going to look at first waiting for the captivity and get a sense of what it meant for these people as they waited for, as we will find out, many, many years. Jackie, we are going to start on your side, if that's okay, with the first reading there of Deuteronomy 28, verse 15 and 36, please.
However, if you do not obey the Lord your God and do not carefully follow all his commands and decrees I am giving you today, all these curses will come upon you and overtake you. ... Down to verse 36. The Lord will drive you and the king you set over you to a nation unknown to you or your fathers. There you will worship other gods, gods of wood and stone.
All right, so here we have right back in Deuteronomy a whole list of curses. Mine has a nice little header of curses for disobedience. So a whole lot of things that would happen to the nation if they were disobedient. Right, so that's what we read in verse 15. If you do not obey carefully, this is what will happen to you by way of curses. And then that following verse in 36, that part of that would be a captivity, that you would be taken away, that you would worship other gods. So this was something very much in Israel's history, and they knew from a very early time that disobedience meant that this may happen. A captivity by a people may happen. Let's continue. Dad is going to read 2 Kings 21, first 6 verses.
2 Kings 21. Manasseh was 12 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 55 years in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Hephzibah. And he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord, after the abominations of the heathen, whom the Lord cast out before the children of Israel. For he built up again the high places which Hezekiah his father had destroyed, and he reared up altars for Baal and made a grove, as did Ahab king of Israel, and worshipped all the hosts of heaven and served them. And he built altars in the house of the Lord, of which the Lord said, in Jerusalem. And he built altars for all the hosts of heaven in the two courts of the house of the Lord. And he made his son to pass through the fire, and observed times, and used enchantments, and dealt with familiar spirits and wizards. He wrought much wickedness in the sight of the Lord to provoke him to anger.
Okay, so we have Manasseh as king. I guess if we scan back to our not map, our chart here, Manasseh is a wee way before. Manasseh is down over here. So before, he's kind of sixth to last king, but he has caused a lot of problems being on the throne. I think he was on the throne, was it 55 years? Is that what you read? So a long time to really do some irreversible damage, you might say, and something God was not very pleased about. Again, if you're a person, this is part of the waiting perhaps. You are now thinking, you know, there's been a lot of bad kings, but Manasseh is just another one. When is this captivity coming? Mum, can you please read Jeremiah 27 verses 1 to 6? I'm going to stand closer to you so that people might hear at home awkwardly.
Okay. Early in the reign of Zedekiah, son of Josiah, king of Judah, this word came to Jeremiah from the Lord. This is what the Lord said to me. Make a yoke out of straps and crossbars and put it on your neck. Then send word to the kings of Edom, Moab, Ammon, Tyre, and Sidon through the envoys who have come to Jerusalem, to Zedekiah, king of Judah. Give them a message for their masters and say, this is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says. Tell this to your masters. With my great power and outstretched arm, I made the earth and its people and the animals that are in it, and I give it to anyone I please. Now I will hand all your countries over to my servant Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. I will make even the wild animals subject to him.
Thank you very much. So Jeremiah with some big piece of timber straps and things around his neck. I'm not exactly sure if it looks like a kind of an ox's goad, but that's what people seem to put. Declares this prophecy that it is indeed imminent, that during the reign of Zedekiah, which I won't go back to the chart, but it was obviously a few kings after now, is going to be the time that God is going to send them into captivity along with, that's going to happen, that Nebuchadnezzar will take them all. All right, let's keep going. 2 more to go. 2 Kings 24, 1 to 4. Please, Juliet.
In his days, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came up, and Jehoiakim became his servant 3 years. Then he turned and rebelled against him, and the Lord sent against him bands of the Chaldees, and bands of the Syrians, and bands of the Moabites, and bands of the children of Ammon, and sent them against Judah to destroy it, according to the word of the Lord which he spake by his servants the prophets. Surely at the commandment of the Lord came this upon Judah, to remove them out of his sight for the sins of Manasseh, according to all that he did, and also for the innocent blood that he shed, for he filled Jerusalem with innocent blood, which the Lord would not pardon.
Thank you very much. So, for what sin was it that they actually went into captivity, according to this verse? The sins of Manasseh, which was the ones that Dad just read out, the 55 years of reign. So it goes all the way back to then that this sort of prophecy was coming to light. That's, again, that potentially they knew, and I think they did. They actually knew in the reign of Josiah that it was because of the sins of Manasseh that they would go into captivity. And yet there were still more kings to come. They had to kind of endure this waiting period through those kings as well, as it all began. All right, one more. If I'm not going too fast, people, if that's all right, we're going to keep going to Ezekiel chapter 7, verse 1 to 4.
Moreover, the word of Yahweh came unto me, saying, Also thou son of man, thus says the Lord Yahweh unto the land of Israel, an end. The end is come upon the four corners of the land. Now is the end come upon thee. And I will send mine anger upon thee, and will judge thee according to thy ways, and will recompense upon thee all thine abominations. And mine eye shall not spare thee, neither will I have pity. But I will recompense thy ways upon thee, and thine abominations shall be in the midst of thee. And ye shall know that I am Yahweh.
Thank you for that, Andrew. So, interesting point. Who knows what the first few verses of Ezekiel says? Ezekiel 1, verse 1 and 2. Basically introduces who Ezekiel was, and I think it says something like Ezekiel, son of someone or other, is one of the first captives sitting by the down in a certain area. So when we're reading Ezekiel, we're reading a man that has already been taken captive. And so this first chunk of Ezekiel is all about the fact that he's in captivity, and he's seeing and he's hearing about what's going on back in Judah and what's going on, because he's down south. He's somewhere down they kind of separated, it seems, the people. I think it's probably good practice that if you capture a whole lot of people, don't put them in one big clump, because they'll just revolt. So they would scatter them throughout Babylon. Daniel, being one of the men that were taken in the first deportation, was already there, and getting these prophecies from God. Here's just one last look at kind of a chart. Sorry, Jackie, I'm getting in and out of your way. To kind of, again, give you perspective on the fact that it kind of happened in waves. So you had the end of 2nd Chronicles and the end of 2nd Kings is all about this, basically. You read the sort of 3 chapters in a row, and it's just, the first deportation of all the kind of the senior people, senior men, and then but they put someone in charge, and then that person doesn't do it very good, so they take a second group of people, and then they take a third set of people, which the third set isn't actually there. Sorry, it's cut off the screen at the top. But there's 3 waves, and I've got a chart which actually does it better. So again, just to accentuate this waiting for captivity, it was really quite a drawn-out process for them. It was over, 19 years, essentially, from the first deportation to the destruction of Jerusalem at the end, when they really took everyone else and left very few people. So just to cover it quickly, we have that first, and it's kind of the well-known one, the first sort of deportation, where Nebuchadnezzar turns up. They take the sons of nobility, so that includes the likes of Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, and Ezekiel as well. So that's why all those guys are there, and they're talking about the fact that, Babylon's happening, but there's still more to happen. So hopefully that gives you some perspective. Second deportation happens because the king was really rubbish that they set up. I think they still called him a king, and he kind of revolted, and so they came back, took more people, all the people that were probably causing the problems, they took them away, and then the last time, again, they deposed Zedekiah, and they left Gedaliah as governor, but then even he didn't last. And then the last few people scattered, and they literally left a few people to look after the land so it wouldn't be completely destroyed. Those numbers out of interest on the right-hand side is how many people that Jeremiah in chapter 52 says got deported. I don't have a solution for this, but it seems like it was a lot more than that. But for some reason, it does say in Jeremiah 52 in those 3 verses, that's how many people were taken each time. But if you look at Ezra 2, there's a massive long list of people that get taken. So it was potentially, people estimate it to be more like 40,000, but that could be give or take 20,000 sort of thing, it seems. So yes, anyway, so the whole waiting for the captivity has, I guess, arrived, and we are now at a point where they have taken this whole nation of Judah over a succession of events out of their land, and only a few people haven't gone to Babylon, a few people have escaped to Egypt, and that, other than that, the waiting is over. Couple of questions. Did they dread that day? After everything we've looked at, do we think, and this is where I open it up to the group, because this is not a right or wrong answer. There is clues in the Bible, but I don't know if it's the full picture. So any opinions on, did they dread that day? People didn't necessarily even think about it, even though, yeah, and maybe it was just too impossible to, to imagine, yeah.
And that God's special treasured possession, so they probably don't believe it.
Right, yeah. Ezekiel tells us they didn't believe it.
The cities are cauldron, we're protected, the armies will be on the outside, and we will be just fine here in the city.
Yeah.
They really, I think they might have thought about it.
Yeah, so in that sense, they didn't really dread it because they didn't think it would happen. Yeah, yeah. That's true. They had false prophets setting them up for failure with that, with what was coming. There's probably a number of different camps of people. I would imagine there were faithful people who perhaps there was dread, but perhaps there was also, if you've seen the reign of Manasseh for 55 years and he's putting his son through the fire and there's righteous blood flowing through the city that he has caused, maybe there's also an element of, I think something needs to change. And if this is the way God says it needs to change, then let's go to captivity, because we've had terrible kings, terrible leadership. Josiah was great. He was a little bit of a blip in the radar of the last sort of 6 kings. Other than that, God needs to intervene. So maybe there was a sense of captivity was the right thing for them.
But I'm just thinking about what we witnessed about Ukraine.
Okay.
The people that dreaded the invasion ran beforehand.
Yep.
They just left everything. Was it 12 million Ukrainians or something have run? So they're gone.
Yeah.
And that might explain those low numbers.
Oh, I see what you mean.
So many people, the people who really dreaded it.
Yeah. Yeah, there is, as I say, Ezra 2, you don't even have to read it all because it's just names, but it lists all the people that came back from captivity, but there could be, that's probably why the numbers are, some did go to Egypt, wasn't many from what I understand, but there was potentially other places they escaped to.
And if you look in Ukraine, they're mostly old people that are left behind.
Right.
In those ruined cities, when you see it on the media, it's mostly old people.
Yeah, interesting.
Jeremiah's counsel was for him to go out and submit to the king of Babylon. So Jeremiah, I don't know, it's such a tough life. Maybe he thought that would be better. But he was welcomed by the leader of Babylon's army.
Yeah.
And he was promoted, he was looked after, and he was asked what would you like to do. and obviously his advice to the king of Jerusalem was go out and submit and it will be well for you. So I don't think Jeremiah dreaded the captivity as much as he knew it was coming.
Yeah.
And he knew it was God's judgment. And if you submitted to that, then it wasn't something to be afraid of.
No.
But Jeremiah didn't. Obviously he got taken to Egypt.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, Jeremiah's.
well for Jeremiah, but
No. No.
and like I said, there was probably a group around Jeremiah.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Yeah, Jeremiah's perspective is probably the most unique, you know, with his with the prophecies he was receiving throughout that period.
I mean, there's no accounting for human nature. You think about the children of Israel in Egypt, they escaped captivity and then they wanted to go back.
That's right. That's right. That's a good point. They, for those that didn't hear that at home, people escaped captivity from Egypt, the Israelites, and then they wanted to go back. Yeah, no, good point. We'll keep moving to the next one because it's still on the same topic. Is there a similar period in our lives, do you think, that we have the same waiting? Are we, firstly, in some sort of situation where there is, like they were in, some bad kings? And is there a similar waiting for us that there's a captivity? I don't actually have an answer for this. I just thought it was an interesting thing to throw out there as to death is
Yeah, waiting for death.
waiting for death. Yep.
Sorry, I'm old, so I think that.
No, that's that's fine. We are looking for the judgments of the God. I think that waiting. Yep.
Judgment of God.
Yes.
On his people.
Yes.
And then later there was the judgment on Babylon.
Yes.
So we're not like the Jews and waiting to be taken into captivity.
Yes.
Okay, but we are waiting for that outpouring of the judgment of God on the wicked world.
Yep.
Where the innocent are not being slain in the streets, but they're trodden underfoot, and we've got greed and cruelty and.
Yep. Robert also says time of trouble in the last days, which I like. But no, I like what you've said, Gnomes. I think there is perhaps a sense that we also I mean, maybe it's almost rude to suggest this is the same sort of thing, but we are also tried in our lives, and we would see some of the trials that we have as God trying to pull us into line. It's certainly not a captivity for most of us, but hey, around the, in different parts of the world, maybe you might say that. But perhaps that's this method of God trying to redirect the path that his people are going, with a captivity in this sense. In our sense, whatever that means that happens is perhaps the same sort of thing that we might apply this to. But as I say, yeah, maybe we're not going to find that much similarity. Yep. Yeah. Oh, totally. Oh, there's real life captivity. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. No, definitely.
But to your point before, Josh, there's also, there are times that we all feel, I think, that you watch what's happening out in the world, you see the deterioration of things, and there is almost kind of, as you were suggesting, that there are people that were back then almost looking forward to it because they were saying the only answer to this is blood flying in the streets from unrighteous kings.
Yeah.
It's almost like something needs to happen. And there's feelings like that now. There's no answer to what's out there.
That's right. Yeah, true.
So there's almost like it's a waiting for the captivity, but probably not in the dread sense. Like in a what else are we looking forward to?
That's right. Yeah, the next king or the next prime minister or the next president. Yeah, the next major. Yeah.
There's no answer to human issues.
Yeah.
We know the answer.
That's right. So in some sense, yeah, we are in a constant state of, rulers that aren't Christ. And for them, as you say, like there's blood flowing in the street. It's captivity for 70 years, by the way, which is not that long. You might take that. Jerusalem gets destroyed, the temple gets destroyed. It's a big deal, but you know, there's potentially quite a positive, yeah. Let's keep moving because we still have a little bit to cover. All right, so that is waiting for the captivity. They are now a captive people, not in their own land. They are in Babylon. Let's turn to Psalm 137. Does anyone know what the psalm is before we get there? Jackie, looking for a star. What's that? Yeah, great song. Really, really strange. I haven't actually looked up why that song is so upbeat. By the rivers of Babylon, where we sat. Like it's like a campfire, like, yeah, yeah, odd.
Which the vast majority of people wouldn't have a clue what it was about.
That's right, that's right. I know, it sounds good. Although there we wept. Oh yeah, great. Happy days. Never has people crying been sung so positively. Okay, so let's read it because it's pretty short. Who was next? Was it? Yes, thank you very much. If you read, don't sing, please. Yes, what's 9 verses? Yeah.
By the rivers of Babylon, where we sat down, yea, we wept when we remembered Zion. We hanged our hearts upon the willows in the midst thereof. For there they that carried us away captive required of us a song, and they that wasted us required of us mirth, saying, Sing us one of the songs of Zion. How shall we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? If I forget thee, O Jerusalem, let my right hand forget me cunning. If I do not remember thee, let my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth. If I prefer not Jerusalem above my chief joy. Remember, O Lord, the children of Edom in the day of Jerusalem, who said, raise it, even to the foundation thereof.
Different.
O daughter of Babylon, who art to be destroyed, happy shall he be that rewardeth thee as thou hast served us. Happy shall he be that taketh and dasheth thy little ones against the stone.
All right, you've got to the end. Sorry. It's distracted by.
I thought someone had started to play the song.
Yeah. Maybe is it Survivor? No, Eye of the Tiger. Not sure that's relevant. Can't bring that in. No, not going to try. Okay, so interesting psalm, right? Like the psalms before, if you scan through, you've got these how good and pleasant it is when brothers live together in unity from David. That's 133, 134. Praise the Lord, all you servants of the Lord. Praise the Lord, 135, 136. Give thanks to God, and then 137. We're weeping in Babylon. We are 500 years on from David, if not more, and we get the psalm just dropped in there about people sitting in captivity by these rivers, Tigris or Euphrates, can't remember. There was 2 rivers that ran kind of either side. So yeah, what a weird thing, right? Weird, I shouldn't call it weird, but it's just an unusual sort of drop of a little song here that really gives an insight, and I think it's one of the most sort of heartfelt with that picture as well of these people who weren't necessarily, you know, getting whipped all day or in slavery. It doesn't really talk too much about that. They were forced to do certain things like bow down to gods. We know that from Daniel. Yeah, there was a variety of things that were against their will, but it wasn't necessarily torture treatment. Instead, they were sitting there, and these Babylonians would walk past and say, sing us some songs of your homeland, you know, pick up your harp. And so it's a really sad picture, I guess, of them waiting for the end of the Babylonian Empire. I've written down some things that they would have been weeping over. You can add to this list if you want. And this is kind of all to do with the waiting. And again, consider the things that we are maybe waiting for as I go through this list. The death of loved ones is part of that. You know, when they got taken out, there would have been some death. The loss of the things they, you know, of their possessions or of their land and of their cattle and their livelihoods. The fact that Jerusalem was destroyed. the temple was burnt down and all of the gold and things were stripped and taken to other temples. The fact that they were forced to march from Jerusalem, that like memories of that day of being dragged out of your city. Perhaps the cruelty of the captors was something they wept over. The opportunity lost. Why did I write that down? I don't know. The opportunity to change their ways back then. You know, they're reflecting on Deuteronomy and on all these prophets that told them it was coming, and these kings that kept doing the wrong thing. They'd lost the opportunity to perhaps stay in their land. And perhaps they wept over their bleak outlook of their future, not really necessarily understanding how long it would be. We know from, again, I've mentioned Ezra chapter 2, because it lists everyone that was taken captive, that the singers were taken. So that's probably the group here that we're talking about. Yes?
Loss of freedom, unless you said that and I...
No, it's not on there. You can have that one. Loss of freedom.
We've all grown up with freedom.
Yeah, right.
Nobody dictating to us what to do,
yeah.
in the sense that
Yep.
they were not free to go.
Yep. No, totally. A question which I don't have on the board there, but they would not sing. I think what verse was that? Verse 4, how can we sing the songs of the Lord while in a foreign land? Do we feel like that? If we might consider ourselves, as we've talked about, in a waiting period of some type, whether we are waiting for a captivity or perhaps feeling captive, taken away from the lands that we want to be in. It's interesting they couldn't sing those songs. I don't know if I fully comprehend that. You'd think that might be something you would like to do. But yeah, an interesting consideration. All right, let's keep going. So waiting for the end of the Babylonian Empire. Let's keep reading. Josiah, heads up, boy. Please, can you read Jeremiah chapter 50, verse 1 and 2, 8 and 9.
Word of the Lord that spake against Babylon and against the land of the Chaldeans by Jeremiah the prophet. Declare ye among the nations, and publish and set up a standard. Publish and conceal not. Say Babylon is taken, Bel is confounded, Merodach is broken in pieces. Her idols are confounded, her images are broken in pieces.
And 8 and 9, yep.
Remove out of the midst of Babylon, go forth out of the land of Chaldeans, and be as the he-goats before the flocks. For lo, I will raise up and cause to come against Babylon an assembly of great nations from the north country, and they shall set themselves in array against her, and from thence she shall be taken. The arrows shall be as of a mighty expert man, none shall return in vain.
Excellent. So we have a change of tune, obviously, from being captive to Babylon will be taken. Babylon will be overthrown, however, whatever you want to call it. Announce and proclaim Babylon will be captured, and the gods Bel and Marduk would be put to shame. Something to wait for. An interesting thing that obviously was probably exactly what they wanted to hear. Let's keep going. Just one chapter over, Darren.
Thus says the Lord, behold, I will stir up the spirit of the destroyer against Babylon, against the inhabitants of Carmel, and I will send to Babylon winnowers, and they shall win over it. And they shall empty her land when they come against her from every side on the day of trouble. Let not the archer bend his bow, and let him not stand up in his armor. Spare not her young men, devote to destruction all her army. They shall fall down slain in the land of the Chaldeans and wounded in the streets. For Israel and Judah have not been forsaken by their God, the Lord of hosts, but the land of the Chaldeans is full of guilt against the Holy One of Israel.
Excellent, thank you. So here we have this promise, again, as kind of just an extension that this will happen. Do not spare her young men, completely destroy her army. They will fall down slain in Babylon. Something they were waiting for. I guess waiting and hoping is different. It's not like they sound like they're glorying in the waiting of this thing. They may well have been, but it's an interesting thing to be waiting for the destruction of an empire. And a couple of extra verses there, Mike, over the page for me.
Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, has devoured us. He has thrown us into confusion. He has made us an empty jar. Like a serpent, he has swallowed us and filled his stomach with our delicacies, and then has spewed us out. May the violence done to our flesh be upon Babylon, say the inhabitants of Zion. May our blood be on those who live in Babylon, says Jerusalem.
Excellent. So that's got more of a tone of, may the violence done to our flesh be upon Babylon, say the inhabitants of Zion. So maybe there wasn't, there is maybe more of a sense of they are getting what's coming to them, and something to wait for. Again, whether we relate to that or not is something we can discuss shortly. Ezra 2, put that there again. I seem to be mentioning it lots. Again, it's actually more relevant to people going back to the land, so let's not even bother with that. Right. Yeah, that's true. So there is a sense of payback for what they have done. Yeah. And then, of course, there's this, which is from Daniel. And what they were also waiting for was God's promises around this vision, which I assume was starting to do the rounds. Daniel was very much a leader, and I assume that the king seemed quite happy with what he was interpreting to some extent, if they survived long enough to more than a day after his interpretation. But this was something they were waiting for the fulfillment of these different kingdoms to happen, which is something that we wait for still. So we still sit on this trajectory with them in the sense of empires to finish. Yeah, whether, again, just to go back to the end of Psalm 137 and what Micah just read, whether we take the same approach of destruction as due to them, I don't know. Yeah. Yeah.
Do we pray that, that's brilliant. Oh, I think that's going to happen.
Yeah.
And it's quite violent.
That's right. That's right.
Because I don't think it's wrong to want vengeance.
You don't think it's wrong to want vengeance?
It's right to give it to God to dish it out.
Right.
Not us to take it, but
right.
It's natural for us to want repayment and vengeance.
Yeah, interesting.
If we give it to God, that's fine.
Yeah,
right.
These people knew that in that captivity.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Praying for the furtherance of that.
Yeah.
That vengeance can be taken.
Absolutely. That's right.
And vengeance is not so much for us. Vengeance is because God's righteousness has been trampled on us.
That's right.
And he needs vengeance.
So we wish for God's righteousness, which by consequence needs vengeance, essentially, to be established. Yeah, absolutely. What else do we know of Babylon in terms of beyond the empire that is just about to end, as we've read? What?
The Persians are mobbing at the gate.
The Persians are mobbing at the gate?
At the border of Ukraine last February.
Yes, no, very much. But beyond that, again, I'm thinking, what's the allusion that comes up later in the Bible to do with Babylon? Let's read this, Nick, please, all the way to the end of not quite the end of Revelation, where Babylon kind of very much the subject of chapters 16 to 18 or so. But I picked out these verses again as to an illusion of what a modern spiritual sense of Babylon is and how it's being portrayed many, many years later.
Revelation 18. After this, I saw another angel coming down from heaven. He had great authority, and the earth was illuminated by his splendor. With a mighty voice, he shouted, "Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. She has become a home for demons, a haunt for every evil spirit, a haunt for every unclean and detestable bird. All the nations have drunk the man and wine of her adulteries. The kings of the earth committed adultery with her, and the merchants of the earth grew rich from her excessive luxury. Then I heard another voice from heaven say, "Come out of her, my people, so that you will not share in her sins, so that you will not receive any of her plagues. For her sins are piled up to heaven, and God has remembered her crimes."
Nice. So still it's the same sort of answer to the end of an empire, all the way in Revelation where Babylon is used in this sense as the sins of the world, that we are, as Nick read, come out of that place of all the sins of the world. Don't get tied up with that because it's fallen, it's evil, and you are to come out of it. So yeah, interesting that it that sort of I mean, and we know that God, you know, works in that sort of way of vengeance, but yeah, sometimes I wonder if we forget that is part of the end of the empire, empirical age. Yeah. All right, let's conclude then with and this is is literally a less than a 5-minute section, so that's good. Waiting for a return to their land, the final section. So the end of the empire is kind of coinciding with, it sounds like they might be allowed to go back to their land because the new king of Persia is going to allow them to go back. It's been 70 years. Jeremiah said it's been 70. So let's read through these 3 verses. So that will be you, Ruth, Jonathan, and Steve. Let's just do them all 3 in a row. Can you read that all right? Oh, yeah, that's pretty good.
Jeremiah 29, verse 10 to 14. For thus saith Yahweh, that after 70 years be accomplished at Babylon, I will visit you and perform my good word toward you, and causing you to return to this place. For I know the thoughts that I think toward you, saith Yahweh, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you an expected end. Then shall you call upon me, and you shall go and pray to me, and I will hearken to you. And you shall seek me and find me, when you shall search for me with all your heart, and I will be found of you, saith Yahweh. And I will turn away your captivity, and I will gather you from all the nations, and from all the places where I have driven you, saith Yahweh. And I will bring you again unto the place whence I caused you to be carried away captive.
Thank you, Ruth. Yeah, it's lovely, isn't it? The thought of you will call unto me and pray to me, and I will listen to you. Jonathan, please, Ezekiel 40, first 4 verses.
In the 25th year of our exile, at the beginning of the year, on the 10th of the month, in the 14th year after the fall of the city, on that very day, the hand of the Lord was upon me, and he took me there. In visions of God, he took me to the land of Israel, and set me on a very high mountain, on whose south side were some buildings that looked like a city. He took me there, and I saw a man whose appearance was like bronze. He was standing in the gateway with a linen cord and a measuring rod in his hand. The man said to me, "Son of man, look with your eyes and hear with your ears, and pay attention to everything I am going to show you, for this is why ye have been brought here. Tell the house of Israel everything you see."
Nice. And then we see for the next 5 or so chapters the design of the temple and the priests being reinstated, the glory returning to the temple, and a vision of a wonderful time. And this is something they're looking forward to. It's only sort of mid time in Babylon. And Steve, can I get you to do, and this is the last verse of the session, Daniel 9, 20 to 25.
Righty, Daniel 9:20. While I was speaking and praying, confessing my sin and the sin of my people Israel, and making my request to the Lord my God for his holy hill, while I was still praying, Gabriel, the man I had seen in the earlier vision, came to me in swift flight about the time of the evening sacrifice. He instructed me and said to me, Daniel, I have now come to give you insight and understanding. As soon as you began to pray, an answer was given, which I have come to tell you, for you are highly esteemed. Therefore, consider the message and understand the vision. 77s are decreed for your people and your holy city to finish transgression, to put an end to sin, to atone for wickedness, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. Know and understand this: from the issuing of the decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until the anointed one, the ruler, comes, there will be 7 sevens and 62 sevens. It will be rebuilt with streets and a trench, but in times of trouble.
Thank you very much, Steve. And what a lovely place to finish on, because what it basically gives us is the fact that we wait now for the same thing that they were waiting for. They didn't know how long it would be, but the 70 times 7, these dates that people have tried to, work out Christ's return, was all tied up with both the end of Babylon and the end of all of the kingdoms. When it ends, to put an end to sin, to atone for wickedness, to bring in everlasting righteousness. So what a wonderful thing and place to end, that the end of Babylon, as we've seen in Revelation, is also the thing that we wait for still. And so any of this waiting for this promised, or to return to the land, to set up the temple that the tribe of Judah were doing, was something that we can also wait for. So that really is the relevant section, I guess, of waiting for us, but with those other two periods as well. So that is waiting to go to and to leave Babylon. Any questions, thoughts, comments before we conclude?
I thought, Josh, that last chapter that you went to, Daniel 9, is such a good example, because Daniel's like a real example of waiting, like you showed, because he went into captivity